All right, teammates, we are back once again. If this is your first time listening to the Move Swiftly podcast, welcome to the show. Welcome to the number one podcast on innovative teamwork. Great to have you. Looking forward to having you back for more. To my regular listeners, you know how we get down here, the struggle, whatever the challenge is, whatever the obstacle is, whatever it is you may be going through in life, we are here to indirectly tell you you are not going through it alone. I have the founder of Against All Odds. I mean, just think of the name of it. You guys know me, you know my story, you know how I started this, how everything came up, and just the name of the company itself, Against All Odds. Miss Isabelle Fortin, Consulting. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Against the ordinary.
Oh, excuse me. All right, so
That's okay.
I have an oversight. Not against all odds,
That's
against the
okay. But
ordinary.
I
However,
like against all odds.
yeah,
I wish I
so
would have thought of that.
So, all right, here's the issue with that. All right. When I read it, I'm against all, and there's an O, and then there's a Tupac song that I think of every time. So I'm assuming it's against all odds. And I'm thinking, okay,
Mm,
maybe she's taking some of Tupac's rhymes, and maybe I'm now her song, but it's actually against the ordinary, which is
yeah.
actually just as influential in my life as well, because a name like Aswan Crookshank, you are thought of anything but ordinary. So against the ordinary,
True.
my apologies for the oversight.
That's
Welcome to the
okay.
show.
That's
Welcome to the
okay.
show. Welcome to the show.
It's just that I didn't want, people to think and look for me on againstalodds.com because that's not me they will find.
Yeah.
So, thank you for having me, Aswan. I appreciate it very much.
Well, thank you for coming on, and I've been like I've saved this conversation, I saved this question for when we started recording because I wanted to make sure everyone heard it just as I heard it, because you're talking about, like you said, against the ordinary. You're talking about consulting. You're talking about helping people recognize a lot of things, and a lot of things that you talk about are really truly triggers for me. And you have a
Mhm.
background in the military. You come from, I
Yes.
believe it's Canada, correct?
Yes.
And
I
you had experience in that military. Can you please dive in a little bit in terms of your experience there and how it was able to kind of translate into the work you're doing now?
Well, it was a long process for me to get to where I am today, but
Mhm.
um it was all congruent. Like in the end when I look back, well,
Hmm.
we know hindsight is 2020, but when I look back, even though when I was going through all of this journey, it didn't make sense. I couldn't connect the dots. Now that I look back, everything makes sense.
Hmm.
So,
Well,
military,
what made you initially go into to military or be a
it
vet?
was a family business.
It was a so yeah, walk us
It
through how did all that work?
Yeah, it really was a family business. My mom and dad both served in the Canadian Air Force. That's how they met. They actually met in Baden, Germany,
Hmm.
and they had my sister and came back to Canada. And when I joined, I'm the youngest, and when I joined, my brother was an Air Force pilot. So for me, it was,
Hmm.
well, you finish
Kind of
high
a
school, you
natural
you
progression.
sign on the dotted line, and you pledge allegiance to the Queen back then. Well, she's deceased now, but to Queen Elizabeth II, and you just join in, and that's what I did. So I didn't even question what I was going to do. It was just, yeah, all right, let's do that,
Wow.
and I did that for a decade,
Hmm.
and for a
And this was like
lot.
right after high school, right?
Yeah, I started boot camp the day after I graduated high school.
Oh my God. No beach week or anything?
Nope, nothing. No time to travel the world and
Right.
no sabbatical to go to Europe or anything like that. Backpacking in
So the
Europe.
day
Nope,
after
nope, nope, nope.
graduation, you're in boot camp.
Next
No.
day, I'm in the bus and I'm, driving and then flying to boot camp, and
Huh.
I'm in the swamp up to my neck for 13 weeks. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So that
Wow.
was boot
I'm
camp.
thinking now because now I'm thinking back to that's a 18-year-old kid, basically, 18-year-old girl.
17. Yeah,
Yes.
I was
Well, no, you're
17.
17. Yeah, so it's different. Not even, oh
Yeah.
man. Man.
I
All
wasn't
right.
even legal to drink. Well, legal age to drink alcohol here is 18. I
Right.
can drink alcohol, I can vote, but
Right.
I could serve my country.
That you could serve your country. Wow. Okay, so
Yeah.
walk us through a little bit about your experience there, because, like you mentioned, it's kind of the natural progression because it's the family business. And
Yeah.
many times when someone kind of just naturally goes into the family business, were there anything that you saw as you're going through it throughout the decade that says, man, there's something more I want to be doing, there's some like trend I want to be breaking, there's something that I'm going through in the day-to-day that makes me say, look, I want to honor them and do something different? How were those, like, can it kind of sum up those 10 years for us?
The first 5 years, I felt like a fish in water. I was very happy. It was very structured. My dad was a very disciplined person, and he raised us that way. And he was a kind man. I don't want to make him sound like he was a mean drill sergeant. He really wasn't. He was a very kind man, but very disciplined. You know, you do
Yeah.
this and then you do that, and then um, so for the first 5 years, it was great. And the camaraderie you get in the military is like no other. The teamwork that you get in the military is like no
Yeah.
other.
Right.
And it was fantastic. Where it started to um, no longer resonate with me is just because of the size of the organization. I'm more of a, 250 employee kind of a person. And here we are. When I was in the military, there were 80,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it was just, the structure was just too big.
Mm-hmm.
And you know how it is, as big as the organization is, the longer it's going to take to change anything,
Mm.
right? So there was, like any big organization, there were things that were kind of incongruent, and it started bugging me and bugging me and bugging me and bugging me. And I left kind of on a, not on a dare, but on a moment of being angry. It wasn't, I didn't think about that decision. I was supposed to be muted somewhere and I didn't want to go. It was like, no, I'm staying here. I'm happy here and I don't want to move no more. And they kind of said, well, sorry, but you signed on the dotted line and you need to go now. And I said, well, here are my papers. I don't need to go anywhere. I can move. I'm not a tree.
Right.
So then I got an extremely cold shower, because when I got to the corporate world,
Mm-hmm.
I thought leadership was equal everywhere. I thought teamwork existed everywhere. I
Right.
thought the military way of doing things was just the way that things were done, because that's all I knew from
You.
my home life to
Oh,
the
mm.
only career I had. And I'm in my late 20s by then, and I really got a rude awakening,
Mm-hmm.
because in my experience in the corporate world, it's every man for themselves. And I heard so many, oh, I don't want to work with her, I don't like her, so I'm not going to work with her. And I'm like, what the heck?
Right.
When you're in the military, you might not like your coworker, but you're going to trust them with your life.
Man.
And it doesn't matter if you don't like them, it really doesn't. So you have to find a way. So even though the structure is extremely command and control,
Mm-hmm.
in reality, what the military is able to do is have everybody put their ego aside,
Yeah.
because it's the mission first,
Right.
it's the team first, it's the organization first. So you don't like her? Tough. We don't care. And it doesn't matter if you've been in 2 months or if you've been in a team for 7 years. If you are better at a job, the boss is going to give you that job.
Right.
And what that does is it taps into the unique abilities of everybody,
Right.
because team efficiency is what is the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm telling you, I like, it comes very easy. The answer comes very easy now,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm 3 decades out,
Right.
and now I'm looking, well, 2.5 decades out. I don't want to age myself a little too much. Um,
Age is a
but
state of mind. That's fine.
I'm looking at it going, oh my goodness, that's why it was working.
Right.
But it took me a long time to figure that out.
Now, when you talk about, and first of all, so much of what you're saying is true. It's kind of reminding me of what it was like when I transitioned from being a football player to now going into the working world, knowing that regardless of how you felt about a certain, I don't want to compare football to the military, but
No, no, but I
how
understand. Yeah.
you, regardless of how you felt about a certain person, by that Saturday, by Friday night, whatever it is, you got to put all that shit aside, and you two got to go together and go win a football game, regardless. And that
Yeah.
bond that it creates, it's so hard to really appreciate that when you're not seeing it. It's like the old saying, you can't see the forest from the trees. So, but there were also things that you just mentioned in regards to certain things that you wanted to see change as the army was getting bigger. What were the things that you would have like that were kind of tugging at your heartstrings that you weren't able to see change as the army was getting bigger, and then you just decided, hey, it's time for me to go, courageously take this step out on my own and figure things out on my own and kind of break from the family ties?
I think that on a purely bureaucratic level,
Mhm.
the bigger the organization and the more paperwork and the more explanation and the more CYA and the more um, things were starting to get complicated as far as paperwork is concerned. It's like any big government agency, right?
Yeah.
Um, so that was getting to me. I discovered, and we have to remember I was a 17-year-old kid when I joined. I didn't know what I liked yet.
Yeah.
We don't know ourselves at that age. We think we do because we're all that in a bag of chips, but we don't really know ourselves. So I was getting to know me a little bit better,
Mhm.
and I needed to be in organizations. I needed to work with people that I could walk into the leader's office, and the leader can actually change something right now. That
Yeah.
doesn't mean that they would have to follow what I'm saying. It's just that I needed the bureaucracy to be
Yes.
less imposing. I'll say it like that. Yeah.
And not only that, but and as you're talking, and this is something that I want to the message that I want to convey to business owners as well that is listening is when you bring in whether it's an employee, whether it's a staff member, whatever it is you want to call the person, and their resume reads, look, I did this with my family. This is the things I learned in the home. You got to speak to that because what you're used to is parents, a brother, that were in this. And when you want something done, you don't want to have to keep going through, certain loopholes and this and that. And that's just not what you're used to. So as you transition into the corporate world, and again, I 1000% agree with you because there were some, listen, when I played college football for two programs, and there were times in which I would be yelled at for not being early enough. So imagine my
Mm.
surprise when I'm big into fitness, I've worked in fitness and education and all that. When people are showing up late regularly and not being reprimanded, not being fired, not being like even talked to or warned, I like to this day, I'm like, I can't fucking, this is fucking, I can't take it. Okay. So speak to us. She's laughing. Yeah. Speak to us a little bit about what that corporate experience was like in terms of just the mindset of people must have been like, okay, at some point I'm going to have to either start my own thing or I'm going to blow up on this whole system. Walk us through those years a little bit.
As one, okay, so first of all, I adore you. You are speaking my language.
All right.
On time is late.
Yes, I mean I can take. I mean,
On time is
we yelled
late.
at for not,
Yeah.
and it would shock me. I'm like, this is not okay.
Yeah. No, no, no. And I have very little tolerance for lateness.
Right.
Um, and I have even less tolerance for um not people not getting consequences. That being said, I'm not talking about, corporal punishment or anything like that, but there needs to be a cost
Yes.
for bad behavior.
Yes.
And yeah, so that's why I was laughing, because that was one of the things that was hard. Is okay, well, we can't hearing leaders as a coworker, as a colleague, hearing the team leader saying, well, okay, I'm going to give that mandate to this person, but normally I would give it to this other person, but since they don't get along, I'm going to.
Hmm.
And I my ears would curl.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, like it was so against my nature. It was
Mhm.
so against, and the everybody for themselves, and it went every which way. It's not only leaders amongst themselves. It's not only colleagues amongst themselves. It is both ways. Leaders in regards to their workers and team members in regards to their leaders. And I have a story about that. It was my first civilian job, and a colleague of mine was sick. She had 102 fever, and she lived her daily commute was 3 hours.
Oh my
So
goodness.
it would take her an hour and a half to get back home with a bus, metro, and another bus
Oh,
with
she didn't have her
102.
own transportation.
No, yeah, she didn't have a car.
Oh no.
So it would take her an hour and a half to go back home with 102 fever.
Right.
So I looked at my boss and I said, if it's okay with you, I'll drive her home.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the military, no man, but you know, you don't leave any man behind, right? You don't let your colleague,
Mm-hmm.
your partner at the office with 102 fever, and for fuck's sakes, excuse
Mm-hmm.
my language,
Oh,
you
it's
don't let
they're
them
allowed to cuss.
ride the goddamn bus.
Yeah.
So I said to my boss, can I drive her home? She said, yeah, up to you, as you wish.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, the there and back would take me about an hour and 15 minutes by car,
Right.
depending on how much traffic I would get.
Mm-hmm.
The following week, I get my paycheck and they dock me an hour and a half pay.
Wow.
As one, this is 1990. Yeah, I want to say 1997.
Hmm.
That was $18 for the company, the already multi-million dollar company, and they docked me 18 bucks. And I went to see my boss and I said, why don't I have a full paycheck? She says,
Right.
well, you missed. I said, what do you mean I missed?
Mm-hmm.
She says, yeah, you went to drive so and so home. And I said, that was on my dime. She said, well, yeah, you weren't at your desk. And for her, that was completely normal. And for me, that was the beginning of the end.
Yeah, well, well, the only thing I'll say is it wasn't the end because you were able to from that. And I want to kind of keep you in that frame of mind because again, against the ordinary, not against all the odds, folks. This isn't Tupac song, but against the ordinary. At some point when you're going through that, you decided that you were going to create your own consulting firm where you were able to get some control and really be able to find a tribe of people to teach this to. And
Yeah.
as I was kind of going through your work and listening and even listening to you now and listening to you on other shows, I was thinking of another colleague of mine who is a former military. And one of the things that I'm actually gonna be doing with the previous guest is every Sunday we're gonna be doing like stay hired Sundays, and she works with a lot of former military to find jobs. So I'm always curious in terms of people who are former military, how they found work, how they are able to, get back on their feet when they left. And he told me that's the wrong question. He goes, the question should be, so B is what are these companies learning from us that
Yes.
actually have been through or have actually been through the system? So I bring that up to kind of ask you now, as you transition, what kinds of things were you thinking when it comes to building this business? Who are you going to serve? How are you going to help them? What was kind of like your overall strategy towards building what you have now?
Well, the first, no, I shouldn't say the first. I should say the biggest shock for me, other than what I've named already, which is, every man for themselves and all that good stuff or bad stuff,
Mhm.
was the lack of leadership training.
Mm,
And I, I haven't seen uh, data. I haven't seen the recent data on this, and I've been looking for it. But the last data that I saw dated 19 no, not 19, 2018,
mhm,
and it said that in corporate America, in company um, smaller than 1,000 employees and more,
mhm.
the leadership training is 6%. So only 6% of leaders and managers actually get leadership training. And that to me is a nonsense,
Mm-hmm.
because leadership is a skill.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a natural talent. You can naturally be good at it, but you still need to train.
Yeah.
I mean, the first time I took a firearm and I sat down, actually laid down and fired my first shot, I wasn't good at it yet
Yeah.
because I needed to be taught.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same thing with leadership. You need to be trained.
Yes.
In the military, 100% of leaders get leadership training,
Mm-hmm.
because when you get to have enough years in and you're due for a promotion, they
Right.
send you to leadership training.
Yes.
And that is what's lacking. It
Mm-hmm.
is not the fault of the leaders. It's not the fault of the CEOs. It's not the fault of middle management. And by the way, middle management have it bad. They are stuck between the rock and the hard place, and it ain't their fault. And they are doing the best that they can. They
Right.
really are. They
Mm-hmm.
don't have the power to change many things, and they're stuck with people that don't necessarily want to work together, and they don't have the skills yet because they are not being taught. They don't have the skills to deal with the higher ups and the people below them. So I don't like the below, but you understand what I mean.
Yes.
So that was the biggest shock, is the lack of leadership training. And when I was done with my corporate career and that I started doing my own thing and I built my first business, I went, no, 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 no. Anybody who is going to be a boss, anybody who's going to have any direct reports under them are going to going to get leadership training.
What the
Leading people, go
go
ahead.
go
I was
finish.
just going to say, leading people
Mhm.
can be learned. You
Yes.
can.
What kind of resistance did you feel, or do you even currently feel when you decided that you were going to go out and do that? Because I have been there. I know exactly what you're talking about. But when you get people that are so stuck in a certain way, so stuck in a certain place, anybody, regardless of who you are, if you're coming in from the outside and you're challenging their comfort zone, they're going to do everything in their power to excuse it, dismiss it, figure out a way to do anything but what it is they need to be doing, which is like you said, develop as a leader, train as a leader, or you will eventually lose your employees, and then the next thing is going to happen is you're going to lose your business. So speak to us a little bit about the resistance that you have had to deal with when you're building this.
Everything I could name boils down to one thing, and that's self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
I ask, I've given I was the keynote speaker in a leadership event,
Mm-hmm.
and there was, 300 people in the crowds, all business leaders, all CEOs or C-suites, or
Mm-hmm.
and I'm extremely interactive when I'm the keynote speaker. I ask them questions, and I wait
I,
until
I
somebody
did the same
answers.
thing. I did the same.
Exactly. And I'll
Well,
tell
you
them
don't. I
this,
mean,
this
people don't want to just sit there and be lectured to.
exactly. This is a, it's better if you participate. It's going to be, it's going to be more
Right.
interesting if you do. So, and one of the first questions that I asked and was, how many of you think that your direct report have the same opinion of your leadership skills as you do? And more than half the room's hand went up.
They think they have the same
And then yeah, and then I said, and how many, with the people with your hands up,
Mm-hmm.
how many of you are willing to bet their house on it?
Uh-oh.
And still, half of them
Huh.
kept their hands up. So these are the people who need my services the most, the ones whose hand stayed up.
Yes.
And these are the people who are never going to hire someone like me,
Hmm.
because they don't have the self-awareness. And there's nothing I can do about that.
Huh.
The people who need me, or anybody that does what I do, need me the most are the people that don't admit, don't I can't even say admit, that don't even recognize that they need training.
So how, like, when you say they don't recognize it though, how were you able to pierce it and find the ideal client for you? Was it this a
Um,
or
the the ideal client for me is heart-centered.
hmm
And most of the time, not always, but most of the time, they show up completely depleted of tools. They've tried everything. They've tried being friendly. They've tried laying down the law. They've tried having one-on-ones with their direct reports. They've tried having group meetings and get their employees to work together.
Right,
They've tried everything
right.
and they show up completely depleted. So that's about 75% of my business. And 25% of my business are I'm being imposed on them.
hmm
So it is their boss, either their middle
Yeah, I
management,
got you.
and yeah, it's their boss saying, "Hey, I saw this chick in, a conference. I really like her. I like what she has to say.
Yeah,
I'm going to hire her for your team."
right,
So when my approach with these leaders aren't is not exactly the same
right.
because they don't know they need me yet. So I have to win them over.
Yeah, and you
And
bring
I
up
do that with my purple hair.
yeah, I was gonna bring that up, and we will get to the salsa lessons at some point, trust me. But this, what you're saying is so important because I want to
Right.
really kind of put a bow on and make sure any business owner out there listening in is really hearing. Put your ears nice and close to wherever it is you're listening to this from. When you say that they have tried everything, one-on-one meetings, group coaching, whatever it is, and they're not getting a certain result, what is the result that they're not getting to make it so they say, look, I just got to do what I have to do and pay for leadership training, whether it's out of my own pocket, whether I got to go bang on my owner's door, my higher up, and say, we need to put this shit in the budget. What's the result that they're not getting?
They're not getting a good team synergy.
Mm,
they they they're wasting their time, and it is a waste. They're
mm,
wasting their time trying to get adults to get along, and they're not succeeding.
yes.
I recently worked with a group not too far in person,
Yeah.
not too far, and it was a small team, 7 people,
Right.
and including the team leader, it was 7 people.
Mm,
They are all microbiologists and they all have post PhDs. So you're talking about extremely
hard.
smart people.
Right.
And when I walked in that office, I thought for sure this is a playground.
hmm
People are fighting over the best stapler and the best parking spot and the best this and the best that, and I know by experience that when it looks like people are fighting for power,
Yeah.
they're actually fighting for recognition.
Yeah.
It's because they don't feel like they know what they bring to the table that nobody else does, and we all do,
hmm
and they don't feel heard, seen, and valued. And
Yes.
when you change that, the dynamic changes.
Okay, I got you. All right, so I want to make sure this gets caught too, because not once in that response, and the reason I actually asked you the question, Isabel, is that you didn't mention money at all.
No.
And so many of you owners will see this thing going on. And because the money's coming in, because the sales are coming in, because you feel like, look, I'm untouchable, then you're like, look, I'm gonna keep, spending my money on stuff that I don't need when this is where the money should be going. You can be creating revenue for yourself, or you can be doing sort of okay lucratively financially. However, your team is suffering. And eventually, if you go out with that mindset of saying, okay, the money's coming in, I'm gonna be good, but you're watching the adults not get along, fighting over stupid shit like parking spaces and all that kind of stuff, you will eventually look up one day and be like, look, I don't have a business because everyone's left. That is a very important thing that you mentioned. And that's why I wanted to ask you, because you did not at all mention the money element to it as much. It was all about, hey, people need to be working together. We need to understand we're part of a bigger picture. And the more responsible thing too is we have young people, we have kids, we have an obligation to our young people to leave the world, leave the business, just like your parents did for you, leave it better than we had it for the young people to come in and move on. That's a very important point that you made as well. So,
And you know what? If you want to talk about money,
mhm.
okay, so here are numbers because some people like data, and so
Let's
I'm good
do
with
it.
that.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Replacing an employee,
Mhm.
the employee turnover is 1.5 to 2 times their annual salary. So if they make
If
$100,000,
you want numbers, folks.
it's going to cost you either 150 to 200,000 to replace that person.
Yes.
And that does not calculate if you paid for a headhunter to hire this person, because that goes on top of that.
Yep.
I recently worked with a group. They had just hired someone 3 weeks prior to meeting me, and I worked with them, and they had paid $33,000 to hire this employee to a headhunter, and I strongly recommended they get rid of her.
Mhm.
Not because she wasn't good, she was extremely skilled, but
Right.
she wasn't the right fit for the company, she wasn't the right fit for the team, and she was eventually going to cost them 3 other employees. So that's the first number. The second number is when teams actually work together
Mhm.
and actually increases their productivity by 82%. What
Yes.
does that do to your bottom line?
Mhm.
When the team leader spends 35 hours out of 40 a week dealing with pettiness and dealing with people fighting over staplers and parking spots,
Mhm.
is that person doing their jobs? No, they are not. So that costs you as an owner, as a company owner, that costs you that annual salary.
Exactly.
Team synergy, people, treating people, showing them what they bring to the table, showing them who they are matters to the team,
Yeah.
is good for your bottom line,
Yeah.
period.
Yeah, I often I kind of use the analogy of someone running on train tracks to where you're running right there as an owner, you're running and running and running, and you're not doing what you have to do to build a team to get off it, but you're the money's there, you're alive today, but any given day, just like I'm out here in West Palm Beach, Florida, any given day, a Category 4 hurricane can come in and just wash everything up if you're not building that. And I'm glad you put numbers to it because when we're talking about business ownership, now the numbers start to really make sense and they realize, look, I have to make this investment. It's so important that you make the investment to build that synergy. And we have to talk about this. We do have to talk about it because I'm looking at it. I have the book right here. Make Your Move, a unique look into boxing, dance, and ultra. And I'll show you the page actually where it's make your move, where I talk about how, and the reason I'm going to bring this up, because the reason I talk about dance and boxing and fitness in the way is when you're a business owner and you're able to create hobbies and create opportunities and you're able to do things and get to know your employees, get to know your staff a little bit outside of what they're just doing for a check, that creates the synergy that we're talking about. That creates the cohesiveness in the workplace that we're talking about. So one of the things that really struck out to me when I was looking you up, and obviously, as you know, I do my research, is you spent some time as a salsa dancer, and I'm not sure if you were able to incorporate that in your consulting and how you help people. But please, just go ahead. The microphone is yours to walk us through.
I For me, dancing is a source of joy. That's how I keep my sanity.
Yes.
And I met my partner dancing because, if if I wanted to meet somebody, if I wanted to share my passion with somebody, well, where better else than to find him on the dance floor, right? If I had gone to a bowling alley, I
I
might
talk
have
about
met
that in my
someone who
too.
likes bowling, but I don't like bowling. I have
Yes.
nothing against it, but it's just not. So for me, it's a whole lot of things.
Right.
It is the music because I'm very musical. I sang in a classical music choir for over a decade. Music is very, very important for me. I go see at least 40 live shows a year. But dancing is just, it's a source of joy. And you know what? I can find, without even thinking, I can find at least 10 ways um, how being a dancer helps me in my business.
Yes.
I'm a ballroom dancer, I'm a salsa dancer. I dance Argentine tango. And I'm not the leader in this little particular duo, so I have to listen.
Hmm.
I have to pay attention. I
Yes.
have to follow orders.
Mhm.
I have to read my partner. I have to read his mood. I have to read what he wants from me when his direction isn't clear. That all applies to leadership.
Yep.
Sometimes, as a leader, you need to speak to one of your direct reports. But if
Mhm.
that person came in and they look like, they spend the entire night on the clothesline, perhaps choosing your moment more carefully would be beneficial. So
Yeah.
it's all, and I used to have a horse, and I can find as many similarities between horseback riding and leadership,
Mhm.
because leadership is everywhere.
Yeah.
Leadership has nothing to do with whether we're the boss or not.
Mhm.
You can be the leader of your community without being the mayor. You can be the leader of your family. You can be the leader of your sports team. You can be, and you don't have to have the captain jersey to be the leader.
Yeah. We actually had a previous guest, shout out to Dr. Sobers. She did a TED talk on how it's called Dancing with Leadership. And she actually
Oh,
she brought a friend out and she walked everyone through how you got to step here. And then the other person who's not leading, step here and step. And it was such a great, because I've watched a lot of TED talks, but I've never seen someone actually do and walk people through the actual dance.
yeah.
And she was literally saying a lot of the same things that you're saying is, it correlates when it comes to the mindset that you have. You just
Yes.
take that mindset, go to your direct reports and realize, okay, this is direction you want to take your company. This is the direction you want to go on this specific day. This is how I gotta take this call. This is how I gotta make this specific report, or how I gotta language this article. All of that goes into the same principles in which we're talking about. And again, I said the regular listeners have heard me say it probably thousands and thousands of times on this show. Two ears, one mouth,
One mouth.
a reason. Two ears, two
Yes.
eyes, and one mouth for a reason. You have got to learn to listen to people. Listen to people. That's what's going to inspire folks to work with you. So, all that being, well, go ahead. You have a
I
thought.
was just gonna say, and even physiologically,
Mhm.
um, listening to somebody
Mhm.
is an effort. And I'm going to tell you why. Because physiologically, we all talk at about 120 words a minute, but we can only register, when we listen, we can only register about 80 words a minute.
Mhm.
So that means if you're not paying attention, from the get go, you're going to miss a third.
Mhm.
So if you're not paying attention and you're not being present, then you miss more than half of the person's message.
Mhm. It's actually something called active listening. I learned that a while ago. Being an individual that hasn't been listened to quite a bit, I learned the importance of not, kind of the golden rule, what you learn as a kid. Don't treat others the way that you don't
Yes.
want to be treated. And when you really know the feeling of not being listened to, folks, you start to have genuine empathy when you see people who really are trying.
Mhm.
They're really busting their ass. They really believe in the work they do. The option was there to stay in the status quo. The option was there to, just go and collect a check and never really help anybody. But the folks that have the courage to step out and do it, like, 99.9, 100% of the people that have been on this show, I make sure I do what I can to listen to everything that they're all about. So, all that being said, please, can you just tell people a little bit about what's next for your business, where you see it growing? What do you kind of envision in the next couple of years about what is you're gonna be doing?
Oh, that's a good question. I tend not to think too much about the future. I I trust my gut. I trust that when it's time to do a move, whether it's a small one or a big one, it's gonna come. I don't have a 5-year plan. I really don't. That's just not the way that I am built.
Mhm.
However, I'm enjoying my work tremendously.
Yeah.
I've been hired a few times I've been doing this for a long time here in Canada locally, and now taking my business online and taking my business in the States.
Mhm.
So I started about 2 years ago being a keynote speaker in English because English is not my mother tongue. And I'm enjoying that very
There is,
much. And
I mean, I heard an accent, but I didn't think you did, just didn't know. Wow.
my mother tongue is French.
Oh man,
Yeah.
man, that's I
Yeah,
had no
my mother
idea.
tongue is
You
French.
did a good
So,
job. I would not have been able to tell.
oh, thank you. That's
Yeah,
very sweet of you. I appreciate that. That's I'll take
not
that
an easy,
compliment to
not
heart.
an easy thing to do.
But for me, doing being a keynote speaker in a second language, that's very interesting.
Mhm.
So I truly hope that that's going to be a part of my business that's going to grow and grow and grow. And why not? Why not travel the world and go speak everywhere, right? Yeah, that would be good as well.
Again.
So I don't think I'm my German isn't good enough to go do a keynote speech in German, but
Mhm.
yeah, I'd love. That's what I envision for myself. But to say that I truly have a plan, I'm just not. My brain is not wired this way. I see a lot of people with their business. They have a 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year plan. I honor that. I envy that. I find that intriguing and extremely interesting. My brain just says, yeah, no, that's not happening. I'm not
It happened. I mean,
structured
we
that
all,
way.
and well, the thing is, I don't know if it's a strength or a weakness. I think it just is what it is because
Exactly.
in many ways, there are times where people talk themselves out of opportunities because they stick to the plan too
Yeah.
too tightly versus someone like you again who is just improving in general. And then what happens happens. That's actually the definition of serial entrepreneur is a lot
Yes.
of people who just understand the numbers, understand the game, understand where they fill in. Then they're just open to opportunities. So there's more than it's very proverbial, but more than one way to skin a cat. All right, guys.
That's right.
When we speak to you, especially on this show, we speak to you in ways, and like I tell you at the beginning, the challenge, the obstacle, the whatever it is you're going through, we're here to give you the option. It's on you to figure it out, however it is you're going to do it. So, can you
Exactly.
just tell people how they can get in touch with you if they want to reach out? Where do you normally send people?
My main hangout place is LinkedIn. My name is Isabelle Fortin, and it's Isabelle with an E. So ISABELLE Fortin. I'm sure you're going to put it in the show notes. So I hang on LinkedIn quite a bit, and my website is againsttheordinary.org. And
Yes.
you can book a discovery call with me directly on my website. And it's been a real pleasure talking with you today,
Oh
François.
man, no, the pleasure's been mine. The pleasure's been mine. It's
Thank you.
I love doing this stuff, So, but it's not over yet. All right. So the final
Sure.
thing I do, the final thing I do to close out all the shows is I want you to use your imagination a little bit. I want you to go back to your high school graduation. You're the 17-year-old girl. Again, you're going into the family business. Pretend it's the next morning. You're on your way to the boot camp. Pretend that that young girl is in the Zoom room right now. Give her some words of encouragement, some words about what life is going to be like, and we'll officially close.
Oh my goodness. I think of this young 17-year-old cocky chick and who knew everything, or at least thought she did. And I think of her very fondly.
Yes.
And well, two things. I would not give her advice because she would not listen to it. But I would tell her, hang on to your hat. It's going to be an interesting ride.
Yes, ma'am. That's beautiful. That's perfect. And again, if you're a first time listener here, the reason I close out with all that show is because, I mean, I close out with that question is because if you are that person, if you are the person that's actually going through that, again, we're speaking directly to you. I love it. Just hang on to your hat. It's going to be a wild,
Uh,
lovely, and I'm
it's
sure
gonna be a
very,
wild ride.
very rewarding one to go from that to teaching actual people leadership training. It's amazing. So again, pleasure's mine. Love having you on. Looking forward to keeping in touch with you and staying
Same
up to
here.
date with everything that you're doing. Everyone out there, fellow teammates, continue to move swiftly. We will talk more soon.